Growing up in Vermont meant bonfires, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, the most beautiful autumn leaves, and the best maple syrup. It also meant the weirdness that is the region known as the Bennington Triangle, which I didn't learn about until the summer I turned 20. And to this day, I never wished that I had found out about that cursed place. My best friend since childhood was Diane, and she had always been an avid ghost hunter. She loved dragging me along to anywhere that was supposedly haunted, even if we weren't allowed to be there. The Green Mountain Cemetery, Sabin's Pasture, and the Community College of Vermont were just a few of our many stops. I had never believed in the supernatural, and for most of my life, I just thought that our midnight graveyard visits and trips to supposedly haunted buildings were a waste of time. My mind was forced to change in the course of a single night in 1983. Our junior year of college had started, and Diane proposed a weekend camping trip to one of the forests in the southern part of the state. She even promised that there wouldn't be any ghost hunting on the trip, which was a nice change of pace. I just wanted to relax for a few days in nature before the harsh Vermont winter drove us to stay inside. A week after she had set up the trip, we found ourselves in the middle of the woods outside the tiny town of Somerset, Vermont, on the morning of October 12th, and soon we had set up a nice campsite. We planned to do some hiking and swimming while we were there, so the rest of the first day was spent in lazy bliss as we canoed, chatted, and fished. And that night, we cooked up the trout that we had caught, and it was a peaceful night spent under the stars. I slept great, and I woke up feeling excited for our hike the next day. We got an early start on our trek up Glastonbury Mountain, and by late afternoon, we had reached the summit. We rested at the top for a while, and roasted some burgers over a small fire for dinner. We made sure to thoroughly extinguish the fire, and as the sun began to bleed out, we made our way back down the mountain on the side that would bring us closer to our camp. I wasn't looking forward to hiking in the dark, but I knew that I would be fine as long as I wasn't alone. Diane and I had also made sure to wear bright colors, myself in neon yellow and her in a flame red, to make it easier to see each other. We had been extra smart and had expected to be heading back to camp in the dark, so we had headlamps ready to go when the last of the light faded. We had made it about a third of the way down when we heard crying. I stopped mid-trail, scanning the area to see what it is. It was clearly the crying of a small child, not the woman-like cries of a mountain lion or another animal. I had spent enough time in the woods to know the difference, and something about this cry unnerved me. Not a single person lived on the mountain itself, and we hadn't seen anybody at all in the time we had been there. I strained my eyes, but I couldn't see any other flashlights or lanterns through the dense thicket. I thought I caught a glimpse of something red moving further out among the trees, but it was gone as soon as I blinked. I turned back to ask Diane what she had thought was going on, but she was heading off the trail and into the woods. I yelled at her to come back, but she refused, saying that she couldn't just leave a kid alone in the woods. I tried to point out that a family was probably going camping nearby, but she ignored me and kept walking towards the sound. Against my better judgment, I followed, hesitating before I stepped off the trail. I didn't want her running through the inky wilderness and getting lost or hurt, but neither did I feel comfortable going off trail in a place that neither of us really knew. Within 10 minutes, I regretted my decision. I had been able to see her for the first few minutes, but then I had lost sight of her shirt. Even the sound of her rapid footsteps crunching the dead autumn leaves began to fade, and no amount of shouting had brought her back. I listened, trying to pinpoint any sound, when I saw a flash of red out of the corner of my eye. I was so relieved that Diane returned that I whipped around, a grin on my face. My relief was immediately replaced with confusion. No one was there, and after a few seconds it dawned on me that I still hadn't heard a sound. A moment later, a tug on my sleeve made me scream. I looked down in horror, my heartbeat drumming in my ears, and I saw a little boy in a red jacket. He was looking up at me with huge, tear-filled eyes, and I felt my fear soften slightly. "Kid, where are your parents at?" "I don't know. Mommy was here, but Now she's not. I crouched down to eye level, making sure that my headlamp wasn't blinding him. What's your name? Paul. I'm Jeanette, and it's nice to meet you, Paul. He stuck out his hand like a little adult, and I shook it with an amused smile. He was a cute kid, and for the first time, I was glad that we had gone off trail to find him. Let's go look for your mom and my friend, okay? He nodded trustingly, and he slipped his hand into mine. We had no idea which direction to take, so we made our way further into the dense woodland. I kept us going in a straight line from the path, and we made sure to call for Diane and his mom every few minutes. I was getting more and more nervous about going deeper into the forest, but I still couldn't bring myself to abandon my friend. Nearly 2 hours later, we ran into the trail again, and it was very close to our campsite. I was hoping that Diane had been smart enough to wait there for me, if she had made it this far, and I was extremely worried at this point. We both had a small flare gun on us in case of emergency, and that was the only thing assuring me that she was still okay. I got a fire going, since Paul's hand was frigid, and I offered to warm him up with some cocoa. He politely declined and curled up in a camping chair by the fire. I sat there in our other chair for about an hour, waiting for Diane to return, and at some point, I must have dozed off. When I woke up, there was a woman by the fire with a weirdly blank look on her face. I blinked rapidly to shake the sleepiness from my eyes, thinking she was a dream, but the figure still remained. I was confused and I began to panic when it dawned on me who she was. Oh, hi, sorry, you must be Paul's mom. I'm so glad you found us. My name is Paula. Oh, that's cute that you named your child after you. He's not my child. Sorry? She hadn't moved, and the silence stretched tensely between us. I yawned and I rubbed my eyes, since I thought that I was still seeing things. I noticed it began to seep from her body, and at first I thought it was just the firelight casting out shadows, or my eyes playing tricks. But it began to pool from her skeletal fingers on the ground. I swore, scrambling quickly out of the chair and away from her. By then I had noticed that Paul wasn't in sight, and I screamed for him. And the woman still hadn't moved, but the ooze had reached my tent. It began to dissolve the nylon, an acidic hiss warring and the crackling from the fire. I don't remember anything after that except for the running towards the car, and trying to explain to the police what had happened. They didn't believe me, of course. When we arrived back at the campsite, they blamed drinking and an unguarded fire for the state of the tent, even though there was no alcohol in my system. They began searching for Diane, but never found any trace of another person. 5 years later, her case had went cold, and I wouldn't be writing this down if my 12-year-old nephew hadn't asked me for a school project that he was working on about people who have seen ghosts. And when I asked why my nephew had picked me to interview, he looked up at me, just like little Paul had done, and he handed me an old, yellow newspaper article dated October 14th, 1950. It showed a picture of a little boy in a familiar red jacket, and the headline was about his disappearance near Glastonbury Mountain on October 12th, 1950. My nephew tugged gently at my sleeve, his eyes wide as he stared at the tears flowing down my cheeks. Don't cry, Auntie. Not everybody gets to meet 2 ghosts in one night. 2? Yeah, don't you ever go to the library? I shook my head and he exasperately pulled out the second article from his school folder. This one had a picture of a woman I had seen that night, and it was about her disappearance from the same area in 1946. They had been both wearing red when they disappeared, and so had Diane. I know that I'll never go back there, but if I were to, I believe that I would see 3 ghosts.